The cracking of wood echoed through the vast Indian territory like a gunshot, jolting Tabitha Lockhart from her exhausted slumber. The wagon lurched violently, then settled at a sickening angle as her world came to an abrupt halt on the desolate trail. April 1876 had brought unseasonable rain to the frontier, turning the path to Oklahoma City into a rutted nightmare, and now this. "No, no, no," Tabitha muttered, scrambling from beneath her canvas cover into the pale morning light. Her heart sank as she assessed the damage. The rear axle had snapped clean through, leaving the wagon tilted like a sinking ship. She was alone, 3 days from the nearest settlement, in territory known for its dangers. This can't be happening. At 22, Tabitha had already endured more hardship than most women twice her age. The Kansas drought had claimed her parents' farm and their lives within a year of each other. Now, her journey to join her only living relative and aunt in Oklahoma City had come to this unceremonious end in the middle of nowhere. Tabitha pushed back her honey-brown hair, streaked with dust from the trail, and surveyed her surroundings. Rolling plains stretched in every direction, dotted with scrubby trees and tall grasses that whispered in the breeze. The beauty of the landscape stood in stark contrast to her dire situation. She had supplies to last maybe 5 days, a rifle she could shoot with reasonable accuracy, and a stubborn streak that had carried her this far. What she didn't have was any idea how to fix a broken wagon axle. "Think, Tabitha," she said aloud, her voice sounding thin in the vast emptiness. She was considering unhitching her mare to ride bareback when a movement on the horizon caught her eye. A rider, approaching at a steady pace from the west. Friend or foe, she couldn't tell, but in her current predicament, she had little choice but to wait and see. Tabitha reached for her rifle, keeping it visible but not aimed as the lone figure drew closer. The rising sun silhouetted the approaching horseman tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, with a characteristic slouch hat that marked him as a cowboy. As he neared, she could make out a strong-jawed face beneath the hat's brim, keen eyes surveying her predicament before they met hers. He reined his dappled gray stallion to a stop 20 feet from her wagon. "Looks like you've got yourself in a spot of trouble, madam," he said, his voice deep but gentle, tinged with the drawl of Texas. "The axle's broken," Tabitha replied, keeping her tone even despite the flutter of relief and wariness battling in her chest. "I'm headed to Oklahoma City." The stranger dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who spent more time in the saddle than out of it. "Name's Adam Thornton," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Might I take a look at your wagon?" Tabitha nodded cautiously, watching as he approached the damaged axle, her rifle still ready at her side. Adam knelt in the mud, examining the brake with practiced hands. "Clean through," he confirmed, looking up at her with eyes the color of a summer sky. "Not something that can be patched up on the trail." He stood, brushing dirt from his worn denim pants. "You're a good 3 days from Oklahoma City and 2 from the nearest trading post in the other direction." "I'm aware of my situation, Mr. Thornton," Tabitha said, lifting her chin. "What I'm not aware of is what you're doing out here alone." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fair question. I'm a scout for a cattle drive headed to Dodge City, rode ahead to check the crossing at the Canadian River." He gestured to the west. "My outfit's about half a day's ride back." "And they won't miss you, not for a while," Adam said. "Look, Miss Lockhart, Tabitha Lockhart. Miss Lockhart, I can't fix your axle here, and I can't leave you stranded in Indian territory. There's a settlement called Silver Creek about a day and a half east. I know a wheelwright there who could help you." Tabitha weighed her options, which were admittedly few. "And how do I know I can trust you, Mr. Thornton?" Adam's expression turned solemn. "You don't, but out here trust is sometimes all we have." He removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "I give you my word as a Thornton I'll see you safely to Silver Creek." Something in his earnest gaze made Tabitha believe him, or perhaps it was desperation. Either way, she lowered her rifle. "Very well, Mr. Thornton, I accept your help." Adam nodded, replacing his hat. "We'll need to salvage what we can from your wagon. Your horse can carry some, mine can take more, and we'll have to leave the rest." The next hour passed in focused labor as they unloaded her most valuable possessions: clothing, food supplies, her mother's silver hand mirror, a family Bible, and a small pouch of coins that represented her entire worldly wealth. They secured her belongings to both horses, leaving the broken wagon like a monument in the vast prairie. "I'm sorry about your wagon," Adam said as Tabitha took one last look at the vehicle that had carried her hopes for a new beginning. "It's just wood," she replied, though her voice betrayed her loss. "My father always said it's not what carries you that matters, but where you're headed." Adam helped her mount her mare, his hands strong and steady at her waist. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her travel-weary body, a sensation she quickly dismissed as simple human comfort after days of solitude. "Silver Creek lies that way," Adam said, pointing eastward as he swung onto his stallion. "We'll make camp at sundown. With luck, we'll reach town by tomorrow evening." As they rode side by side into the unknown, Tabitha cast one final glance at her abandoned wagon. It was more than wood, it was the last connection to her old life. Now she was truly adrift, her fate tied to a stranger with kind eyes and a promise. The prairie stretched before them, golden and infinite under the climbing sun. For better or worse, her journey had taken an unexpected turn, guided by a cowboy who had appeared like a guardian angel in her moment of need. The day warmed as they rode eastward, the spring sun climbing steadily in a cloudless sky. Adam maintained a watchful vigilance, scanning the horizon frequently as they traveled. Tabitha found herself studying him when his attention was elsewhere, the way he sat easy in the saddle, the weathered lines around his eyes that spoke of years under the open sky, the gentle way he handled his horse. "Have you been a cowboy long, Mr. Thornton?" she asked, breaking the companionable silence that had settled between them. Adam glanced her way, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Since I was old enough to sit a horse without falling off. My father ran cattle in the Texas Hill Country." His expression clouded briefly. "Lost the ranch in '67 after the war. Times were hard." "I'm sorry," Tabitha said, recognizing the familiar shadow of loss. He shrugged. "Been driving cattle north ever since. Not much of a life for settling down, but it suits me well enough." Adam turned the conversation away from himself. "What takes you to Oklahoma City, if you don't mind my asking?" "My Aunt Alina, my mother's sister. She's my only family now." Tabitha adjusted her bonnet against the strengthening sun. "The drought took our farm in Kansas, my father first, then mother followed within the year." "Grief, the doctor said, though I think it was more the burden of trying to keep the farm going. And now you're starting fresh." "Trying to," Tabitha said with a wry smile, "though this delay wasn't part of my plan." "Plans have a way of changing out here," Adam observed. "The frontier doesn't much care for what we intend." They paused around midday to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of jerky, hardtack, and dried apples from Tabitha's provisions. Seated on a fallen log, Tabitha watched as Adam checked both horses' hooves for stones and stress, his movements practiced and gentle. "You're good with them," she noted. "A man's horse is his lifeline out here," Adam replied, straightening. "Treat 'em right and they'll never let you down." "Unlike people," he added with a hint of something darker. "You sound like you've been let down more than once," Tabitha ventured. Adam's eyes met hers for a moment, then shifted away. "Everyone has their share of disappointments, Miss Lockhart." He secured the cinch on his saddle. "We should move on if we want to make good distance before dark." As they continued their journey, the landscape gradually changed. The open prairie gave way to more varied terrain, gentle hills, stands of cottonwood and elm trees along the small creeks they crossed. Adam pointed out landmarks and signs of wildlife, teaching Tabitha to read the land as they traveled. "Pawnee used to hunt these lands," he explained as they crossed a shallow stream. They're mostly up in Nebraska now, on the reservation. This territory belongs to the Cherokee, Creek, and Choctaw nations now, though the boundaries aren't always clear to outsiders like us. Are we in danger? Tabitha asked, suddenly more aware of their vulnerability. Not likely if we keep to ourselves and travel respectfully, Adam said. The nations have their own laws and governments. They're civilized folk, despite what Eastern newspapers might print. As the afternoon wore on, Tabitha found herself fighting fatigue. Days of tense, solitary travel had taken their toll, and the rhythmic motion of her horse threatened to lull her into sleep. Adam noticed her drooping posture. "There's a good spot to make camp up ahead," he said, pointing to a cluster of trees alongside a small creek. "We've made good time today." The site he chose offered shelter, water, and enough open space to keep watch for any approach. Adam demonstrated a practiced efficiency as he unsaddled the horses and secured them where they could graze. Tabitha gathered firewood, grateful for the opportunity to stretch her legs. "You've done this before," Adam observed as she expertly arranged kindling for a fire. "My father believed daughters should be as self-sufficient as sons," Tabitha replied, striking a match. "Said the frontier didn't care whether you wore trousers or skirts." "Wise man," Adam commented, unpacking their supplies. "Too many folks come west unprepared for what they'll face." As twilight deepened into night, they sat beside the small fire, the flames casting flickering shadows on their faces. The vast prairie around them seemed to come alive with sounds: the rustle of nocturnal creatures, the distant howl of a coyote, the gentle nickering of their horses. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Tabitha said softly, looking up at the emerging stars. "Even when it's frightening." Adam followed her gaze upward. "That's the frontier for you, beautiful and deadly in equal measure." He added a small branch to the fire. "You need to respect both sides to survive out here." "Is that what you do? Survive?" He considered her question longer than she expected. "For a long time, that's all I did. Now." He shrugged. "I suppose I'm looking for something more, though I couldn't tell you what." The honesty in his voice stirred something in Tabitha. She recognized in him the same restlessness she felt, the same search for purpose beyond mere existence. "My mother used to say that sometimes we find what we're looking for in the last place we'd expect," she offered. Adam's eyes met hers across the fire, something unspoken passing between them. "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Tabitha agreed, feeling the familiar pang of loss. "I hope to be half the woman she was someday." They fell into companionable silence, finishing their simple supper of beans heated over the fire and the last of Tabitha's cornbread. When the meal was done, Adam stood and stretched. "I'll take first watch," he said. "You should get some rest. We've got another full day of riding tomorrow." Tabitha nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she truly was. She spread her bedroll near the fire, using her saddle as a pillow. As she settled in, she watched Adam move to the edge of their campsite, his silhouette strong against the star-filled sky. "Mr. Thornton," she called softly. He turned back to her. "Yes, Miss Lockhart. Thank you for stopping, for helping." She paused. Most men wouldn't have bothered. In the firelight, she caught the hint of a smile. "Get some sleep, Miss Lockhart. Dawn comes early out here." As Tabitha drifted toward sleep, lulled by the crackling fire and the soft night sounds, she realized that for the first time since leaving Kansas, she felt safe. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight she could rest under the watchful eye of a man who had appeared in her moment of need like a guardian angel from the vast prairie itself. The strange comfort of that thought followed her into dreams. Dawn came in a wash of pale gold across the eastern horizon, rousing Tabitha from the deepest sleep she'd had in weeks. She woke to find Adam already tending a small breakfast fire, coffee brewing in a battered tin pot. "You let me sleep through the night," she observed, sitting up and smoothing her tangled hair. Adam handed her a steaming cup. "You needed it more than I needed sleep." "That's hardly fair to you," she protested, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Life rarely is," he replied with a half smile. "Besides, I've gone longer without rest. The cattle drives to Dodge City sometimes keep a man in the saddle for days at a stretch. As they shared a breakfast of hardtack softened in coffee and strips of dried venison, Tabitha noticed Adam seemed alert despite his claimed lack of sleep. His eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, missing nothing. "Is something worrying you?" she asked. Adam took a moment before answering. "Just being cautious. I spotted some tracks while you were sleeping. 3 riders passed about half a mile south before sunrise. Indians?" "No." His jaw tightened slightly. "Horse thieves, most likely, or outlaws heading for the nations. The Indian Territory can be a refuge for those running from the law." A chill ran through Tabitha despite the morning warmth. "Should we be concerned?" "We'll adjust our route a bit," Adam said, draining his coffee. "Stay closer to the tree lines where we can, avoid open country when possible." They broke camp efficiently, leaving little trace of their presence. Adam showed Tabitha how to scatter the fire ashes and cover them with dirt, explaining that even the smallest sign could tell a story to those who knew how to read it. The day promised to be warmer than the previous one, with high clouds streaming across the blue expanse above. They rode at a steady pace, their path taking them through more varied terrain as they approached the eastern edges of the territory. Rolling hills gave way to occasional rock outcroppings, and stands of trees became more frequent. "The land changes here," Adam explained as they navigated a passage between 2 rugged hills. "We're getting closer to the Arkansas border. Silver Creek sits just a few miles inside the territory." "What kind of settlement is it?" Tabitha asked, eager to learn more about their destination. "Small but sturdy. Started as a trading post about 15 years back. Now there's a proper store, a smithy, even a small church." He adjusted his hat against the climbing sun. "The wheelwright I mentioned, Josiah McKee, has a shop there. Good man, fair prices. And how do you know him?" Adam's expression turned thoughtful. "Helped him out of a scrape with some rustlers a few years back. He's been a friend ever since." "You seem to have friends scattered all across the frontier," Tabitha observed. "Not friends so much as people who remember a good turn," Adam replied. "Out here, your reputation travels faster than you do." They stopped around midday to rest the horses beside a clear running stream. While the animals drank, Tabitha removed her boots to soak her feet in the cool water, sighing with relief. "Saddle sore?" Adam asked, looking amused. "My pride would prefer I deny it, but yes," she admitted with a rueful smile. "I'm accustomed to riding, but not for days on end." "You're doing well for someone who was traveling alone in a wagon just yesterday," he said, genuine respect in his voice. "Necessity is a powerful motivator, Mr. Thornton." "Adam," he said suddenly. "Out here, Mr. Thornton sounds too formal. My friends call me Adam." Tabitha felt a warmth rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the midday sun. "Then you should call me Tabitha." Their eyes met for a moment longer than was proper, and Tabitha found herself noticing the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the way the corners crinkled when he almost smiled. The moment broke when Adam tensed suddenly, his gaze shifting past her to the ridge above the stream. Tabitha turned to follow his line of sight and saw 3 riders silhouetted against the sky watching them. "Don't move suddenly," Adam said quietly, his hand drifting toward the revolver at his hip. "Stay calm and follow my lead." The riders began descending toward them, taking a winding path down the rocky slope. As they drew closer, Tabitha could see they were rough-looking men, trail-worn and heavily armed. Their leader, a barrel-chested man with a bushy beard and a scar running along his jaw, raised a hand in greeting that seemed more threat than welcome. "Afternoon," he called, his voice gravelly. "Fine day for a ride." Adam nodded, his posture relaxed but alert. "That it is." The 3 men halted their horses a short distance away, evaluating Adam and Tabitha with predatory interest. The bearded leader's eyes lingered on Tabitha, then on the loaded packhorses. "Traveling far?" he asked. "Just to Silver Creek," Adam replied evenly. "My sister's wagon broke an axle. We're heading there for repairs." Tabitha kept her expression neutral at the lie, understanding Adam's strategy. A brother and sister might be less tempting targets than a man traveling with an unrelated woman. The leader scratched his beard. Bad luck, that. We're headed south ourselves. Been tracking some strays from our herd. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Don't suppose you've seen any cattle bearing the Lazy S brand? Can't say that we have, Adam answered. We've been keeping to the eastern trail. A tense silence followed as the men exchanged glances. Tabitha could feel the hostility radiating from them like heat from a stove. These were not cattle ranchers looking for strays. That's a fine-looking gray you're riding, the second man said, a lanky figure with a pockmarked face. Thoroughbred stock, Morgan, Adam corrected. Good trail horse, nothing special. The third rider, younger than his companions with a nervous energy about him, spoke up. And what's in all those packs? Seems like a lot for just a short trip. Before Adam could answer, the leader raised his hand. Now, Pete, don't be rude. Folks are entitled to their privacy. He tipped his hat to Tabitha with mock courtesy. Pardon my friend's curiosity, miss. The trail can make a man forget his manners. Tabitha nodded stiffly, fighting to keep her fear from showing. Adam subtly shifted his horse to place himself between her and the strangers. We should be moving on, Adam said. Want to reach Silver Creek before dark. Of course, the leader agreed too readily. Same direction we're headed as it happens. Perhaps we could ride together. Safer in numbers, they say. The threat was thinly veiled. Adam's hand hadn't moved from near his gun. Appreciate the offer, but we prefer to set our own pace. My sister tires easily. The leader's friendly facade slipped for just a moment, revealing the coldness beneath. Insisting on going alone might make a man wonder what you're hiding. Nothing to hide, Adam replied calmly. Just prefer our own company. The standoff stretched for several heartbeats, tension crackling in the air like the prelude to a lightning strike. Tabitha held her breath, acutely aware of how outnumbered they were. Finally, the bearded man shrugged. Suit yourself. The territory can be dangerous for those riding alone. He gathered his reins. Come on, boys, these folk want their privacy. The three turned their horses and rode off southward, but not before the leader cast one last, calculating look over his shoulder. Adam didn't relax until they were well out of sight. We need to move now, he said, his voice tight with urgency. They'll circle back once they're out of view. Horse thieves? Tabitha asked, hurriedly pulling her boots back on. Worse, Adam replied grimly. I recognize the one with the scar, Jake Harmon. He's wanted in 3 territories for murder and robbery. Those weren't idle threats. They mounted quickly and set off at a brisk pace, no longer following the trail but cutting across country. Adam led them through a series of ravines and wooded areas, clearly seeking to break their trail and confuse any pursuit. There's an old trapper's cabin about 2 hours from here, he explained as they rode. We can hole up there until dark, then push through to Silver Creek under cover of night. You seem to know this area well for a cattle driver, Tabitha observed. Adam glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. I've ridden through these parts more than once. A man learns the land or he doesn't survive long. They rode hard for the next hour, the sun beating down mercilessly. Tabitha's muscles screamed in protest, but fear kept her going. Whenever they crested a rise, Adam would pause briefly to scan their back trail for signs of pursuit. I think we've lost them for now, he said during one such stop, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. The cabin's just beyond that line of trees. The cabin turned out to be little more than a crude shelter, 3 walls of stacked logs with a sloping roof, built against a rock face that served as the 4th wall. Inside was a simple stone hearth, a rough wooden bench, and nothing else. It's not much, Adam acknowledged as they dismounted, but it's defensible and hidden from the trail. They led the horses behind the cabin where a small spring bubbled from the rocks, providing water. Adam unsaddled the animals but kept them ready for a quick departure. We'll rest here until sundown, he said, checking his revolver. Then make a night ride to Silver Creek. It's risky, but less risky than encountering Harmon and his men again. Inside the cabin, they sat with their backs against the cool rock wall, sharing jerky and the last of Tabitha's dried fruit. The close confines of the shelter made Tabitha acutely aware of Adam's presence beside her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the faint scent of leather and horses that clung to him. "I'm sorry for putting you in danger," she said softly. "You could have been well on your way back to your cattle drive if not for me." Adam shook his head. "I made my choice when I stopped at your wagon. No point in regrets now. Still, I'm grateful." She hesitated. "May I ask you something, Adam?" He turned to look at her, his face half in shadow. "Ask? Why did you stop? There must be dozens of stranded travelers on the frontier. Why help me?" For a long moment he was silent, as though weighing how much truth to share. "When I first saw your wagon, I remembered something from years back. During the war, my younger sister tried to make it to Texas from Missouri after our mother died. Her wagon broke down in Cherokee land." His voice grew quieter. "No one stopped to help her. By the time word reached us, it was too late." Tabitha felt her heart constrict. "I'm so sorry." "It was a long time ago," he said, though his eyes told a different story. "But when I saw you standing there beside your broken wagon, looking so determined despite everything, I couldn't just ride past." The honesty in his words touched something deep inside Tabitha. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his. "Thank you for telling me." Adam looked down at their hands, then back to her face. Something changed in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then a sound from outside, the distant whinny of a horse, broke the spell. Adam was on his feet in an instant, gun drawn. "Stay here," he whispered, moving to the cabin's entrance. Tabitha held her breath as he peered cautiously around the log wall. After what seemed an eternity, he relaxed slightly. "Just a wild Mustang," he said, holstering his weapon, "but we should keep quiet anyway." The remainder of the afternoon passed in tense vigilance. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Adam studied the lengthening shadows outside. "We'll leave in an hour," he decided. "Ride through dusk into nightfall. It's about 3 hours to Silver Creek if we push hard." Tabitha nodded, steeling herself for the difficult journey ahead. As they prepared to depart, checking cinches and securing their belongings, she found herself watching Adam's hands, strong, capable hands that had come to her aid when she needed it most. She wondered what would happen when they reached Silver Creek, when her wagon was repaired and their paths were meant to diverge. The thought brought an unexpected pang of loss, as though she were already missing something she hadn't fully found. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple as they mounted up and left the shelter of the cabin. Adam led them along a different route than they had come, following game trails and dry creek beds where their passage would leave minimal signs. As twilight deepened into night, Tabitha looked up to see the first stars appearing overhead. Despite the danger that might still be pursuing them, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, she felt a strange sense of rightness riding beside this quiet, honorable man through the wild beauty of the territory. Whatever tomorrow might bring, this moment, this unexpected journey had already changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. The night enveloped them like a protective cloak as they rode eastward, stars wheeling overhead in the vast prairie sky. Adam set a steady pace, fast enough to cover ground but not so punishing that the horses would tire too quickly. They rode in silence for the most part, alert for any sound that might indicate pursuit. Tabitha found herself drawing strength from Adam's calm presence. Despite the danger, despite her fatigue, she felt oddly alive, each sense heightened, each moment vivid and immediate in a way she had never experienced before. The cool night air against her skin, the rhythmic movement of her horse beneath her, the occasional brush of Adam's arm against hers when the trail narrowed, all seemed etched into her consciousness with extraordinary clarity. After about 2 hours of riding, they crested a low ridge. Adam reined in his stallion, gesturing for Tabitha to do the same. "Look there," he said softly, pointing to a faint glow on the horizon. "Silver Creek." Relief washed through Tabitha at the sight of those distant lights. "We made it." "Not quite yet," Adam cautioned, though she could hear the smile in his voice. "But we're close." They continued their journey with renewed energy, the promise of safety drawing them onward. As they rode, Adam shared stories of Silver Creek, the widow Miller who ran the only boarding house in town, old Josiah McKee, whose wheelwright skills were renowned throughout the territory, the young schoolteacher who had arrived last year and already had most of the unmarried men in town vying for her attention. "Sounds like you know everyone," Tabitha observed. Adam shrugged. "It's a small place. Folks tend to remember a face. And how do they remember yours?" she asked, curious about how others saw this man who had become so important to her in such a short time. He was quiet for a moment. "Depends on who you ask, I suppose," he finally answered. "Some might say I'm trouble, others might say I'm a man who pays his debts." "And what would you say?" Tabitha pressed gently. Adam glanced her way, his face half illuminated by starlight. "I'm just trying to do right by the day I've been given." The simplicity and honesty of his answer touched Tabitha deeply. Before she could respond, however, Adam tensed, raising his hand in a silent signal to halt. They stopped, and in the stillness, Tabitha heard what had alerted him, the distant sound of hoofbeats coming from behind them. "Riders," Adam whispered. "3, maybe 4. Harmon, likely." His expression was grim in the darkness. "They must have picked up our trail." Tabitha felt fear rise in her throat. "What do we do?" Adam scanned the terrain ahead, making a quick decision. "We split up. I'll lead them away while you make for Silver Creek." "No," Tabitha protested immediately. "I won't leave you to face them alone." "It's not up for debate," Adam said firmly. "The town's less than an hour's ride that way." He pointed toward the distant lights. "Follow the creek. When you reach it, it'll lead you straight to the settlement. Find Josiah's shop on the east end of the main street and tell him I sent you." "Adam, please, Tabitha." He moved his horse closer to hers, reaching out to grasp her hand. "I can outride them, but not with you alongside. This is the only way to make sure you're safe." The intensity in his eyes silenced her objections. She knew he was right, even as every instinct rebelled against leaving him. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said, squeezing his hand. "I promise." His voice softened. "I'll find you in Silver Creek when it's safe." With that, he released her hand and turned his horse. "Head east and don't look back. Wait for me at Josiah's." Before Tabitha could say anything more, Adam wheeled his stallion around and rode off at a gallop, heading south in a direction perpendicular to their original path. The sound of his departure seemed to hang in the air for a moment before being swallowed by the vastness of the night. Fighting back tears of fear and frustration, Tabitha urged her mare eastward, toward the promise of safety that Silver Creek represented. She forced herself not to look behind, focusing instead on the path ahead and the lights that grew incrementally brighter with each passing minute. She rode hard, her heart pounding in her chest from exertion, from fear, from the terrible knowledge that Adam was deliberately drawing danger away from her. The selflessness of his action wasn't lost on her, nor was the risk he was taking. The sound of running water eventually reached her ears, and she found the creek Adam had mentioned, a silver ribbon in the moonlight, curving through the landscape toward the settlement. She followed its course, grateful for the clear guidance it provided. As she approached the outskirts of Silver Creek, the scattered lights resolved into the windows of buildings, a proper town after days in the wilderness. She saw a church steeple silhouetted against the night sky, a few larger structures that must be stores or offices, and a scattering of smaller dwellings. Tabitha entered the town at a canter, drawing curious looks from the few people still abroad at this hour. She reined in beside a man walking along the main street. "Excuse me," she called, her voice breathless. "I'm looking for Josiah McKee's workshop." The man, middle-aged, with a thick mustache, looked surprised at being addressed by a lone woman riding into town at night. "End of the street, madam," he replied, pointing east. "The building with the wagon wheel over the door, but he'll be closed at this hour." Tabitha didn't wait to hear the rest, spurring her tired mare toward the indicated building. As she approached, she saw a light still burning in the window despite the late hour. She dismounted hastily, nearly stumbling as her legs, stiff from riding, hit the ground. The workshop door opened before she could knock, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man with iron gray hair and a full beard. He held a lantern aloft, studying her with keen eyes. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice deep and resonant. "Are you Josiah McKee?" When he nodded, she continued quickly. "Adam Thornton sent me. He's in trouble, men following us. He led them away so I could reach town safely." At the mention of Adam's name, the wheelwright's expression changed from cautious to concerned. He stepped back, ushering her inside. "Come in, quickly. Tell me everything." Over the next quarter hour, Tabitha related the events of the past 2 days: her broken wagon, Adam's timely arrival, their encounter with Harmon and his men, and finally their separation near town. As she spoke, Josiah's face grew increasingly grave. "Jake Harmon," he muttered when she finished. "Bad business. Man's got more blood on his hands than the butcher." "We have to help Adam," Tabitha insisted, fighting exhaustion. "He saved my life." Josiah nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like Thornton, all right, always putting himself in harm's way for others." He rose from his chair, reaching for a shotgun mounted on the wall. "I'll rouse Sheriff Daniels and a few reliable men. We'll ride out and look for him." "I'm coming with you," Tabitha said, standing despite her body's protests. "No, miss," Josiah countered gently but firmly. "You're dead on your feet, and it won't help Thornton to have you collapsing in the search. Stay here where it's safe. My daughter Rebecca lives upstairs. She'll see to your needs." Before Tabitha could argue further, the door opened and a young woman entered, presumably Rebecca, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Father," I heard voices. "Rebecca, this is Miss Lockhart. She needs a place to rest while I'm gone." Josiah quickly explained the situation to his daughter, who immediately took charge of Tabitha with a kindness that brooked no resistance. "We'll take care of her, father," Rebecca assured him. "You just find Adam and bring him back safely." As Josiah departed to gather the search party, Rebecca led Tabitha upstairs to a small but comfortable bedroom. "You can wash up here," she said, indicating a basin and pitcher. "I'll bring you something to eat and some tea." Left alone, Tabitha sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the past days crashing over her like a wave. She had made it to Silver Creek, but at what cost? Adam was out there somewhere, facing dangerous men because of her. The thought that he might be hurt or worse while she sat in safety was almost unbearable. She had known him for such a short time, yet the idea of a world without his steady presence seemed suddenly, terrifyingly empty. It was then, sitting in a stranger's home in a town she'd never seen before, that Tabitha Lockhart realized she was falling in love with the quiet cowboy who had appeared like a guardian angel beside her broken wagon. The realization shook her to her core, both for its unexpected intensity and its terrible timing. She had spent so long focusing on survival, on rebuilding her life after loss, that she hadn't recognized the space growing in her heart for something more, for someone who understood what it meant to face the frontier with courage and compassion. Now, all she could do was wait and pray that he would return to her, that she would have the chance to discover if what she felt might somehow be returned. Rebecca returned with a tray of food and a steaming cup of tea, her kind face creased with concern at Tabitha's obvious distress. "Try to eat something," she encouraged. "You'll need your strength." Tabitha managed a few bites to be polite, but her appetite had fled. "Has your father known Adam long?" she asked, seeking any connection to the man whose fate now consumed her thoughts. Rebecca nodded, sitting beside her on the bed. 3 years now. Adam saved father from rustlers who tried to burn his workshop when he wouldn't pay their protection money, rode into town like something out of a dime novel, they say, and drove them off single-handed. She smiled at the memory. Father says there's not a braver man in the territory, though Adam himself would dismiss such talk. That sounds like him, Tabitha agreed, finding comfort in Rebecca's words. He doesn't seem to think his actions are anything special. That's just his way, Rebecca replied. But folks around here know different. If anyone can outride Jake Harmon, it's Adam Thornton. Despite Rebecca's reassurances, sleep eluded Tabitha that night. She lay awake, listening for hoofbeats, for voices, for any sign that the search party had returned. The hours stretched endlessly, each minute an exercise in hope and fear. Dawn was breaking, painting the eastern sky with pale gold when Tabitha heard the commotion downstairs, men's voices, movement, the sound of boots on wooden floors. She was out of bed in an instant, not bothering with her shoes as she rushed down the stairs. The workshop below was filled with men, dust-covered and weary from their night's search. Josiah stood among them, giving instructions. Tabitha scanned the faces desperately, looking for the one that mattered most. And then she saw him standing by the door, his clothes torn and dirty, a blood-stained bandage visible on his upper arm, but unmistakably, wonderfully alive. "Adam," she breathed, barely aware she had spoken aloud. He turned at the sound of her voice, his tired face transforming with relief when he saw her. Without conscious thought, Tabitha moved toward him, weaving through the crowd of men until she stood before him. "You're hurt," she said, her eyes fixed on the bandage. "It's nothing," Adam replied, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Just a graze." Tabitha wanted to touch him, to assure herself he was really there, but hesitated, suddenly aware of the eyes upon them. Adam seemed to sense her conflict, for he reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and real and steadying. "You made it to Silver Creek safely," he said, and she could hear the question beneath the statement. "Thanks to you," she answered. "Though I've been worried sick since the moment we parted." Something flickered in Adam's eyes, a vulnerability, a warmth that hadn't been there before. Before he could respond, however, Josiah approached them. "Thornton, you need rest and proper tending to that arm," the older man insisted. "Sheriff's got Harmon and one of his men locked up. The third won't be troubling anyone again. Your part in this is done." Adam nodded, the weariness evident in every line of his body. "What about Miss Lockhart's wagon? She needs to get to Oklahoma City." "I'll see to the wagon," Josiah promised. "But that's business for later. Right now, you both need rest." As the other men filed out, Josiah guided Adam and Tabitha to the kitchen at the back of the workshop, where Rebecca was already preparing breakfast. The domestic normalcy of the scene, the aroma of coffee, the clatter of plates, the morning light streaming through curtained windows seemed surreal after the dangers of the night. Over the meal, Adam recounted his encounter with Harmon and his men, how he had led them on a chase through rough country, hoping to lose them in the darkness, but they had proven more persistent than expected. The confrontation had come near a rocky outcropping where Adam had been forced to make a stand. "I didn't want it to end in shooting," he said grimly, "but they gave me no choice. The sheriff and his men arrived just as it was getting ugly." "Thank God they did," Tabitha said fervently. When breakfast was finished, Josiah insisted that Adam take the spare room above the workshop to recover. Tabitha returned to her borrowed bedroom as well, finally surrendering to exhaustion now that she knew Adam was safe. She slept deeply and dreamlessly, waking only when Rebecca gently roused her in the late afternoon. "Father wants to talk to you about your wagon," the young woman explained, "and there's supper ready if you're hungry." Refreshed by sleep, Tabitha made her way downstairs to find Josiah and Adam seated at the kitchen table, deep in conversation that ceased when she entered. Adam stood, his injured arm now properly bandaged, his face clean-shaven and more rested than before. "Miss Lockhart," he greeted her, suddenly formal in a way that caught her off guard, "I hope you slept well." I did, thank you, she replied, puzzled by his shift in demeanor. How is your arm? Healing, he said simply, then gestured to Josiah. Mr. McKee has some news about your wagon. The wheelwright nodded, wiping his hands on a cloth. I sent my apprentice out to salvage what he could. The axle's broken clean through, as you said, but the wagon itself is sound. I can have a new axle made in 2 days, 3 at most. That's wonderful news, Tabitha said, relief flooding through her. I can't thank you enough, Mr. McKee. No thanks needed. Any friend of Thornton's is welcome to my help, Josiah replied warmly. You're both welcome to stay here until the repairs are complete. Over supper, Tabitha noticed Adam's continued reticence. He answered when spoken to but volunteered little and seemed to avoid meeting her eyes. The easy camaraderie they had developed on the trail had been replaced by a wall of formality that she couldn't understand. When the meal ended, Rebecca began clearing the dishes, and Josiah excused himself to check on some work in the shop, leaving Adam and Tabitha alone at the table. The awkward silence stretched between them until Tabitha could bear it no longer. Have I offended you somehow, Mr. Thornton? She asked quietly, deliberately using his surname to highlight the distance he had created. Adam looked up, surprise crossing his features. No, of course not. Then why are you suddenly treating me like a stranger? He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. I'm not. I'm trying to be respectful. Respectful? We've been through an unusual situation together, Adam explained hesitantly. Out on the trail, certain. Familiarity was necessary. But now that we're back in civilization, I don't want to presume upon your good opinion. Tabitha studied him, realization dawning. You think that now that I'm safe, I no longer need your company, that I might prefer to maintain proper distance. Adam's silence was answer enough. You saved my life, she said softly. You risked everything for a woman you barely knew. Do you truly think I could simply thank you politely and go on my way as if none of it mattered? It's what most proper ladies would do, Adam replied, though something in his voice suggested he hoped she was not like most ladies. Tabitha felt a surge of boldness, born perhaps of the dangers they had faced together, or perhaps of the feelings that had been growing in her heart since that first moment by her broken wagon. Then I must not be a proper lady, she said, reaching across the table to cover his hand with hers. Because I find I'm not at all ready to say goodbye to you, Adam Thornton. The change in his expression was subtle but profound surprise, giving way to a cautious hope that warmed his blue eyes. Tabitha. Before he could continue, Josiah returned, bringing with him news about materials needed for the wagon repair. The moment between them was broken, but something had shifted. The wall of formality had cracked, if not completely fallen. Over the next 2 days, as Josiah and his apprentice worked on crafting a new axle, Adam and Tabitha fell into a comfortable routine in Silver Creek. They took meals together with the McKees, walked through the small town in the evenings, and shared stories of their lives before the frontier had brought them together. Adam spoke more freely now of his past of growing up in Texas, of losing his family's ranch after the war, of the years he had spent driving cattle northward and exploring the territories in between drives. In turn, Tabitha shared memories of her parents, of the Kansas farm that had been her childhood home, of her dreams for a new beginning in Oklahoma City. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, as they sat on a bench outside Josiah's workshop watching the town's activities, Adam turned to her with an expression of quiet determination. Your wagon will be ready tomorrow, he said. Josiah says the new axle is stronger than the original. It should carry you safely to Oklahoma City. Yes, Tabitha acknowledged, feeling a twist of apprehension at what his next words might be. I've been thinking about what happens next, Adam continued, his eyes meeting hers directly. My outfit will be wondering what became of me. I should report back to them before they send out a search party. Tabitha felt her heart sink, though she had known this moment was inevitable. Of course, you have responsibilities, I do, he agreed, but I also have choices. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. What do you mean? Adam shifted on the bench to face her more directly. The cattle drive will reach Dodge City with or without me. Trail bosses come and go, but the herds always get through. He paused, seeming to gather his courage. What if I didn't go back? What if I rode with you to Oklahoma City instead? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibilities. Tabitha felt her pulse quicken. You would do that, if you wanted me to, Adam said, vulnerability clear in his face. These past days, they've meant something to me, Tabitha, more than I can properly express. They've meant something to me too, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Adam reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. I know we haven't known each other long. I know this is forward of me. But out here on the frontier, life doesn't always give us the luxury of time or convention. No, Tabitha agreed, finding courage in his earnestness. It doesn't. I'm not asking for promises, Adam clarified, just the chance to see where this road might lead. To get to know you better, away from danger and necessity. Tabitha looked into his eyes that had watched over her, protected her, seen her at her most vulnerable and her most determined. In them, she saw not just the man he was, but the possibility of what they might become together. I would like that very much, she said, squeezing his hand. I can't think of anyone I'd rather have beside me on the journey to Oklahoma City. The smile that spread across Adam's face was like sunrise breaking over the prairie, warm and full of promise. In that moment, Tabitha knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they had faced the dangers of the Indian Territory. The journey that had begun with a broken wagon axle was taking her somewhere she had never expected to go, not just to a new city, but to a new life, with a man who had appeared in her moment of need like a guardian angel and revealed himself to be something far more human and far more wonderful. A partner for the road ahead. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that seemed to reflect the lightness in Tabitha's heart. She stood in Josiah's workshop, watching as the wheelwright and his apprentice made final adjustments to her repaired wagon. Good as new, Josiah declared, patting the solid oak of the new axle. Better, in fact, this'll see you all the way to Oklahoma City without trouble. I can't thank you enough, Mr. McKee, Tabitha said sincerely. Your kindness has meant everything. The older man waved off her gratitude. Any friend of Adam's is a friend of mine, speaking of which. He glanced toward the door where Adam was loading their provisions for the journey. Josiah lowered his voice. He's a good man, Miss Lockhart, one of the best I've known. The trails made him cautious with his heart, but once given, his loyalty doesn't waver. Tabitha felt a blush warm her cheeks. I've seen his character for myself, she replied softly, and I value it deeply. Josiah nodded, satisfied. Then I wish you both safe travels and good fortune. As the morning progressed, their departure preparations were completed. Rebecca provided a basket of freshly baked bread and preserves for their journey. The sheriff stopped by to inform them that Jake Harmon and his surviving companion were being transported to Fort Smith for trial, ensuring they wouldn't trouble the trails again. By mid-morning, they were ready to leave. Adam had sent a message with a passing rider to his cattle drive outfit, explaining his absence and resignation. It was time for a change anyway, he told Tabitha as he helped her onto the wagon seat. The trail gets in a man's blood, but eventually, every cowboy starts thinking about what comes after. With final farewells to the McKees and the few other Silver Creek residents they had met during their stay, they set off eastward, Tabitha driving the wagon while Adam rode alongside on his gray stallion. The road to Oklahoma City stretched before them, a journey of several days through increasingly settled territory. As Silver Creek receded behind them, Tabitha felt a curious mixture of emotions: gratitude for the safety and kindness they had found there, excitement for the journey ahead, and a deeper, growing warmth whenever she looked at the man riding beside her wagon. What will you do in Oklahoma City? she asked as they traveled, curious about Adam's plans now that he had chosen to accompany her. He considered the question thoughtfully. I have some savings from my trail days. Enough to start something small, perhaps. I've always had a way with horses, might look into breeding or training stock. He glanced her way. What about you? Will you stay with your aunt long? I'm not sure, Tabitha admitted. Aunt Alina offered me a home when I wrote to her, but I don't want to be a burden. I had thought perhaps I might find work as a seamstress or shop assistant. They discussed possibilities as the miles passed beneath the wagon wheels, their conversation flowing easily between practical matters and deeper sharing. By the time they made camp that evening in a pleasant grove beside a stream, Tabitha felt as though she had known Adam for years rather than days. As they sat beside their small fire after supper, watching the first stars appear overhead, Adam reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small package wrapped in cloth. I got this in Silver Creek, he said, handing it to her with an almost shy hesitation. It's not much, but… Tabitha unwrapped the cloth to find a small silver comb, delicately crafted with a pattern of prairie flowers etched into its surface. Oh, Adam, she breathed, running her fingers over the intricate design. It's beautiful. I noticed your mother's mirror was one of the first things you saved from the wagon, he explained. Thought this might go with it, something new to carry forward. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Tabitha deeply. Thank you, she said, looking up at him with eyes that shimmered in the firelight. Not just for this, but for everything. For stopping when you saw my broken wagon, for protecting me, for choosing to come with me now. Adam moved closer on the log they shared, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. I've spent years drifting from one cattle drive to another, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. But when I saw you standing beside that broken wagon, something changed. He took her hand gently in his. It was like finding something I didn't even know I was looking for. Tabitha's heart quickened at his words, at the quiet sincerity in his voice. I was so afraid when I saw my axle had broken, she confessed. Afraid I would die alone in that wilderness. When you appeared on the horizon, it was like… She paused, searching for the words, like a guardian angel sent to lead me home. I'm no angel, Adam said with a soft laugh. Just a man who couldn't ride past someone in need. You're more than that to me, Tabitha whispered, finding courage in the intimate darkness around them. Much more. The space between them seemed to shrink of its own accord. Adam's hand rose to gently touch her cheek, his eyes asking a silent question. In answer, Tabitha leaned forward, closing the distance until their lips met in a kiss as gentle as a prairie breeze and as profound as the vast sky above them. When they finally parted, Adam's expression was one of wonder and certainty combined. I think I've been waiting my whole life to find you, Tabitha Lockhart, he said softly. Then I'm glad my wagon axle broke, she replied with a smile, because otherwise we might never have met. They spent the remainder of the evening close beside the fire, talking of hopes and dreams, of the future that suddenly seemed full of possibilities. When finally they retired to their separate bedrolls, Tabitha fell asleep with the silver comb clutched in her hand and the memory of Adam's kiss warming her heart. The journey to Oklahoma City took 4 more days, each one strengthening the bond between them. They traveled through changing landscapes, open prairie giving way to more wooded terrain, isolated homesteads appearing with increasing frequency, occasional small settlements where they could replenish supplies. As they grew closer to their destination, Tabitha found herself both anticipating and dreading their arrival. Oklahoma City represented the security she had been seeking since leaving Kansas, but it also meant the end of this precious time alone with Adam, this journey that had brought them together. On the evening before they expected to reach the city, they made camp for the last time. After they had eaten and the fire had burned low, Adam took her hand and led her a short distance from their camp to a small rise overlooking the sleeping landscape. I've been thinking, he said, his voice carrying in the still night air. About what happens when we reach Oklahoma City tomorrow." Tabitha nodded, her heart beating a rapid rhythm. "As have I. I know you have plans to stay with your aunt," Adam continued, "and I would never presume to interfere with your family obligations, but—" He hesitated, then squared his shoulders as if gathering courage. "I want you to know that my feelings for you have only grown stronger with each passing day. What began as a chance encounter has become the most important meeting of my life." Tabitha felt tears spring to her eyes at the earnestness in his voice. "Adam, I'm not asking for any declaration from you now," he hurried on. "Just your permission to call upon you properly once we're settled in the city, to court you as you deserve to be courted, not just as a traveling companion on the trail." Relief and joy flooded through Tabitha. "I would like that very much," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "In fact, I was afraid you might simply see me safely to my aunt's door and ride away." Adam shook his head, stepping closer to take both her hands in his. "I couldn't do that even if I wanted to," he admitted. "Which I don't. These past days have shown me what I've been missing in all my years of wandering. For the first time, I'm thinking about putting down roots." His eyes, luminous in the moonlight, held hers. "With you, if you'll have me." In answer, Tabitha rose on tiptoe and kissed him, pouring into the gesture all the emotions that words seemed inadequate to express. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and for a long, perfect moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them beneath the vast prairie sky. When they finally returned to camp, hand in hand, Tabitha felt as though she were walking on air. Whatever challenges awaited them in Oklahoma City, they would face them together. The following day dawned bright and clear, perfect for their arrival in the frontier city that was to be their new home. As they crested the final rise and saw Oklahoma City spread before them, a growing settlement of wooden buildings, dusty streets, and bustling activity, Tabitha felt a curious mixture of anticipation and nostalgia. "It's larger than I expected," she commented as they approached the outskirts. "It's growing fast," Adam agreed. "The railroad came through last year, brings new folks every day." They made their way into the city, navigating streets crowded with wagons, riders, and pedestrians. Adam asked directions to Cherry Street, where Tabitha's aunt resided, and they soon found themselves outside a neat white clapboard house with green shutters and a small garden. Tabitha felt suddenly nervous as she climbed down from the wagon. This was the moment of truth, meeting the aunt she knew only through letters, beginning her new life in the city, introducing Adam to her only family. Before she could knock, the front door opened, revealing a slender woman in her 50s with graying auburn hair and a face that bore a striking resemblance to Tabitha's mother. "Tabitha," the woman called, her face lighting with recognition. "Is that really you?" "Aunt Alina," Tabitha confirmed, moving forward to embrace her aunt. "Yes, it's me." The older woman hugged her tightly, then stepped back to look her over. "You're the image of your mother at your age," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been so worried." "Your letter said you'd arrive nearly a week ago." "I'm sorry for the delay," Tabitha apologized. "My wagon axle broke in Indian territory. If not for Mr. Thornton here, I might never have made it at all." Alina turned her attention to Adam, who had dismounted and stood respectfully nearby. "Then it seems I owe you a debt of gratitude, Mr. Thornton, for bringing my niece safely to me." Adam touched the brim of his hat. "No debt, madam. It was my honor to assist Miss Lockhart." Something in his tone, or perhaps in the way his eyes lingered on Tabitha's face, caused Alina's eyebrows to raise slightly. A knowing smile touched her lips. "Well, you must both be exhausted from your journey," she said, gesturing toward the house. "Please come inside. I have fresh lemonade and dinner nearly ready. Mr. Thornton, you'll join us, of course." "I wouldn't want to impose, madam," Adam began. "Nonsense," Alina cut him off firmly. "Any man who saved my niece deserves at least a home-cooked meal." "Besides," she added with a twinkle in her eye, I want to hear the full story of this broken axle and how you came to my niece's rescue." Over dinner in Aliner's comfortable dining room, they related the tale of their journey, the broken wagon, the encounter with Harmon and his men, the sanctuary of Silver Creek, and their journey to Oklahoma City. They presented a somewhat edited version, of course, omitting the growing feelings between them and the kisses shared beside campfires. Nevertheless, Aliner proved to be perceptive. As the evening drew to a close and Adam prepared to take his leave, she pulled Tabitha aside in the kitchen. "He seems a fine man, your Mr. Thornton," she observed casually. "He's not my Mr. Thornton, Aunt Aliner," Tabitha protested, though she could feel heat rising in her cheeks. "No," her aunt smiled knowingly. "Well, perhaps not yet. But I've lived long enough to recognize when two people share something special." She patted Tabitha's hand. "Your mother would approve, I think." In the front hallway, Adam was preparing to depart for the hotel where he planned to stay while looking for more permanent lodgings. He had already arranged to have Tabitha's wagon stored at a local livery stable until she decided what to do with it. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Wilson," he said to Aliner, using her married name for the first time. "Aliner, please," she corrected him. "And you're welcome here anytime, Mr. Thornton. Perhaps for Sunday dinner this weekend." Adam's eyes met Tabitha's, warm with unspoken meaning. "I'd be honored," he replied. "If that suits Miss Lockhart as well." "It does," Tabitha confirmed, smiling. At the door, with Aliner tactfully retreating to the kitchen to give them a moment of privacy, Adam took Tabitha's hand. "I'll call on you tomorrow, if I may," he said softly. "I'll be waiting," she replied, squeezing his fingers gently. He hesitated, then leaned in to place a brief, tender kiss on her cheek. "Sleep well, Tabitha," he whispered before turning to go. She watched him mount his gray stallion and ride off into the gathering dusk, her heart full to bursting with happiness and hope. What had begun as a disaster on the lonely trail through Indian Territory had led her not just to her aunt's home in Oklahoma City, but to a man who had become more precious to her than she could have imagined. The following weeks were a time of adjustment and new beginnings for both Adam and Tabitha. True to his word, Adam called upon her regularly, always respectful of her aunt's presence and the proprieties of courtship in the city, which were rather different from the intimate conversations they had shared beside campfires on the trail. Aliner proved to be an excellent ally in their budding romance. While she maintained the appearance of proper chaperonage, she also contrived to give them time alone together, sending them on errands, suggesting walks in the nearby park, inviting Adam for meals, and then remembering urgent correspondence that required her attention in another room. Adam found work surprisingly quickly, his experience with horses attracting the attention of a prominent local rancher who was looking for someone to manage his breeding program. The position came with a small house on the ranch property, just a few miles outside the city limits. "It's nothing fancy," he told Tabitha as they walked through the city park one Sunday afternoon, "but it's solid and clean. 2 bedrooms, a decent kitchen, even a small porch where a person could sit and watch the sunset." The hint of future possibilities in his description wasn't lost on Tabitha. "It sounds wonderful," she said sincerely. "I'm so happy for you, Adam. This position seems perfect for your skills." "It feels right," he agreed. "For the first time in years, I'm not thinking about the next trail drive or where I'll winter. I'm thinking about building something lasting." He glanced down at her, his eyes full of meaning, something worth staying for. As spring gave way to early summer, Tabitha also found her place in Oklahoma City. Her aunt, a widow who ran a small millinery shop, was delighted to have her niece's company and assistance. Tabitha's skilled needlework and eye for design proved valuable in the business, and she soon had a small following of customers who specifically requested her work on their hats and bonnets. Throughout these weeks of settling in, the bond between Tabitha and Adam deepened. Each day revealed new facets of the other's character, new reasons to admire and care for one another. The foundation that had been laid during their perilous journey from the broken wagon to Silver Creek grew stronger with every shared conversation, every laugh, every quiet moment of understanding. On a warm evening in late June, nearly 2 months after their arrival in Oklahoma City, Adam invited Tabitha to dinner at the ranch where he worked. Mr. Donovan, his employer, and Mrs. Donovan would be present, he explained, making the invitation entirely proper. Eleanor, who had come to think of Adam as the son she never had, readily gave her blessing for the outing. Adam arrived to collect Tabitha in a smart buggy, looking more polished than she had ever seen him. He had traded his trail clothes for a crisp white shirt, dark waistcoat, and clean trousers. His hair was neatly combed, though a rebellious lock still curled over his forehead in a way that made Tabitha's heart skip. "You look beautiful," he said as he helped her into the buggy, his eyes appreciating the pale blue dress she had made especially for the occasion. "As do you," she replied with a teasing smile, "though I must say I miss the dust and trail grime sometimes." Adam laughed as he took his seat beside her. "Only sometimes. I consider that progress." The drive to the Donovan Ranch was pleasant, the evening air fragrant with wildflowers and the promise of summer. Adam pointed out landmarks along the way, including the small house where he now lived, visible from the road as they approached the main ranch property. Dinner with the Donovans was a delightful affair. Mr. Donovan, a hearty man in his 60s with a booming voice and expansive gestures, regaled them with stories of the early days of ranching in the territory. Mrs. Donovan, petite and soft-spoken but sharp as a tack, made Tabitha feel immediately welcome. "Adam speaks of you constantly," she confided when the men had stepped outside to look at a new foal. "I've never seen him so settled and content. You've worked quite a transformation on our wandering cowboy." After dinner, instead of immediately returning to the city, Adam suggested they stop at his house so he could show Tabitha around. With the Donovans' blessing functioning as tacit chaperonage, and with the understanding they would not linger, Tabitha agreed. The small house was indeed, as Adam had described it, simple but welcoming, with sturdy furniture and windows that caught the golden light of the setting sun. He showed her each room with a mixture of pride and nervousness, clearly valuing her opinion. "It's lovely, Adam," she said sincerely as they stood in the main room. "It feels like a real home." "It's getting there," he agreed, then hesitated, "but it's missing something important." "What's that?" Adam took both her hands in his expression suddenly serious. "You, Tabitha." Her breath caught at the simple declaration and all it implied. "Adam, I know it's only been a few months since I found you stranded in Indian territory," he continued, his voice low and earnest. "Some might say it's too soon, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "I love you, Tabitha Lockhart. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you standing beside that broken wagon, refusing to be defeated by circumstance." Tabitha felt tears welling in her eyes as Adam sank to one knee before her, opening the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring with a small pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I'm not a wealthy man," he said, "but I promise to work hard every day to give you the life you deserve. To protect you, to honor you, to walk beside you through whatever joys and sorrows life brings." His blue eyes, earnest and vulnerable, looked up into hers. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Joy bubbled up inside Tabitha like a spring breaking through parched earth. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Adam Thornton, I would be proud to be your wife." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. When he rose to his feet, she flew into his arms, and their kiss was a promise of devotion, of partnership, of a future built together on the foundation of trust and love that had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances. The ride back to Oklahoma City seemed to pass in a dream. They made plans, shared hopes, and marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment of perfect happiness. When they arrived at Aliner's house, Adam formally asked for her blessing on their engagement. The older woman, who had been expecting this moment for weeks, gave it unhesitatingly, embracing them both with tears of joy. "Your mother would be so happy," she told Tabitha privately later that evening. "She always wanted you to find a love as true as she had with your father. I believe you have." The wedding took place in September 1876, when the worst of the summer heat had passed, and the prairie was painted with autumn colors. It was a simple ceremony in Oklahoma City's small church, attended by Aliner, the Donovans, Josiah and Rebecca McKee, who had made the journey from Silver Creek specially for the occasion, and the friends that both Adam and Tabitha had made in their new community. Tabitha wore a dress of ivory silk that she had crafted herself, adorned with lace from her mother's wedding gown. Adam, standing tall and proud at the altar, wore a new suit that made him look every inch the successful rancher he was becoming, though the cowboy in him showed in his straight posture and weathered hands. When they spoke their vows, promising to love and cherish one another for all their days, Tabitha thought of that broken wagon axle in Indian Territory, of the man who had appeared like a guardian angel to lead her home. How strange and wonderful that what had seemed like disaster had led to her greatest happiness. After the ceremony, they hosted a modest reception at Aliner's home, with tables set up in her garden under strands of paper lanterns. There was music and dancing, laughter and tears of joy, and a sense of community that wrapped around the newlyweds like a blessing. As evening fell and the celebration continued, Adam led Tabitha away from the crowd, to a quiet corner of the garden where they could speak privately. "Happy, Mrs. Thornton?" he asked, his eyes crinkling with the smile she had come to love so dearly. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "And you?" "I keep thinking about how differently things might have turned out," Adam said, his arms tightening around her. "If I had taken another trail that day, if I hadn't seen your wagon." "But you did," Tabitha reminded him, tilting her face up to his. "You saw me when I needed you most, and you stopped. Everything good in our lives now grew from that moment." Adam kissed her tenderly, then rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you this, Tabitha Thornton, I will never ride past when you need me. I will always be there by your side for all the days we're given. And I will stand beside you," she whispered back, "through whatever lies ahead." Partners always. That night, they departed for Adam's small house on the Donovan ranch, now their home, in a buggy decorated with ribbons and flowers by their well-wishers. As they drove away from the city lights, the vast prairie sky opened above them, stars blazing with undiminished brilliance despite the passage of time and civilization. In that moment, under the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting and their growing love, Tabitha knew with absolute certainty that the broken wagon axle had not been a disaster at all, but rather the beginning of a journey more beautiful than any she could have planned. 10 years later, in the spring of 1886, Tabitha Thornton stood on the wide porch of the ranch house, watching as her husband instructed their 8-year-old son, William, in the proper way to approach a young colt. Beside them, 6-year-old Emma waited impatiently for her turn, her pigtails bouncing as she hopped from one foot to the other. The years had been kind to the Thorntons. Adam's skill with horses had eventually allowed them to purchase their own modest ranch adjoining the Donovan property. What had begun as a small breeding operation had grown steadily, with Adam's horses developing a reputation for quality and soundness that drew buyers from as far away as Kansas City. Tabitha had continued her needlework, expanding from millinery to dressmaking, and eventually opening a small shop in Oklahoma City that Aliner now helped to manage. Her designs, combining practicality with touches of elegance suited to frontier life, had found eager customers among the growing population of the city. Their children were the greatest joy of their lives, William with his father's thoughtful nature and love of horses, Emma with her mother's determination and quick mind, and 3-year-old James, currently napping inside with a sunny disposition that charmed everyone he met. As she watched her family in the spring sunshine, Tabitha felt a familiar surge of gratitude for the life they had built together. The frontier was still a place of challenges and occasional hardships, but facing them together had only strengthened the bond that had begun in those dangerous days when Adam had led her to safety. From inside the house came the sound of James waking from his nap, his small voice calling for her. With one last glance at the tableau of her husband and older children, Tabitha turned to go inside, her heart full. That evening, after the children were asleep, Adam and Tabitha sat together on the porch swing, watching as twilight softened the outlines of their land. It was a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage, this quiet time together at day's end, sharing the small victories and challenges that made up their life. "I had a letter from Josiah today," Adam mentioned, his arm comfortably around Tabitha's shoulders. "Silver Creek is growing. They're talking about bringing the railroad through next year." "That's wonderful news," Tabitha said. "Though I hope it doesn't change the town too much. I've always treasured my memories of it." "As have I," Adam agreed. "It will always be special to us, I think, the place where we truly began." Tabitha leaned her head against his shoulder, thinking of the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The open trail, the freedom of riding wherever the wind took you?" Adam considered the question thoughtfully, as was his way. "Sometimes," he admitted. "On certain days when the horizon seems to call, but then I look at you, at our children, at all we've built together." He squeezed her gently. "And I know that I found a freedom far greater than any trail could offer. Even with a wife who still can't make decent biscuits after 10 years of trying." Tabitha teased, referencing her one persistent culinary failing. Adam laughed, the sound still as warm and rich as it had been when she first heard it beside a broken wagon in Indian Territory. "Especially with that wife," he assured her. "Her other qualities more than compensate." They fell into comfortable silence, rocking gently as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys: horses to tend, children to teach, work to complete, but for now, this moment of connection was enough. "I love you, Adam Thornton," Tabitha said softly, words she had spoken countless times over the years, but that never lost their meaning. He turned to kiss her temple, his voice a gentle rumble against her hair. "And I love you, Tabitha Thornton, more with each passing day." As night settled fully over the prairie that had first brought them together, Tabitha thought again of that broken wagon axle, of the despair she had felt standing alone in Indian Territory. How impossible it would have seemed then that disaster could lead to such perfect happiness. Yet here they were, surrounded by the family they had created, secure in the life they had built together, their love only deepened by the years and experiences they had shared. What had once appeared to be the end of her journey had proven to be merely the beginning, the first step on a path that had led her not just to safety, but to a love that would sustain her all her days. The axle had broken, but her heart had found its home, guided there by a cowboy who had appeared on the horizon like a guardian angel and who had proven to be something far more valuable: a partner, a lover, a friend for the journey of a lifetime.